Good day, viewers. This program of lectures on Christianity and related issues is meant for the general public. There's nothing churchy about it or denominationally oriented about it. We're discussing a matter that concerns a lot of African people, particularly in areas such as places such as South Africa, where the Bible was used to hoodwink people into colonization and oppression. When whites came in, they came with the Bible, and they did not tell us, neither did they know that the Bible was written by African people. And so in the process of the pains our people experienced from colonization and oppression, they assumed that this Bible was written by whites and in order to tame them against rebellion and the removal of colonial burdens on their lives. The truth, however, is that the Bible is an African text. Let's go into this matter. We don't originate from South Africa. We Africans in this subcontinent originate from the Middle East, and in particular the area around Sudan. The Garden of Eden, which we find in the Bible, straddles from the bottom or the southern border of Sudan up to where the river Euphrates and the river Tigris stands in the Middle East, near Middle East. So the Garden of Eden straddled across that whole region. It was not just a simple homeyard garden. It was a vast land full of plants, edible and inedible, I suppose, and animals. The first person who was created by God, Adam, and his wife Eve, were given charge of the garden. So, and they did not write anything. They merely obeyed God and so on. The Bible that we read today is 2,500 years away from the Garden of Eden in terms of time. So all the communities who lived in the Garden of Eden and beyond lived on the basis of traditions, obedience to parents, and so on, without any text. The oral text or the traditional text was the one that kept the people intact. But you and I are fortunate. We are living now almost at the tail end of human history. We are able to look back and say, where did such a thing, such and such a thing originate from? What happened on the way? Is it pure? Is it not adulterated, and so on? So the purpose of this lecture and those that will follow hereafter is to clarify, inform and clarify, especially African people who live in our country, on the issue of the origins of the Bible, why it is here and why some people have kept it to use it against us. Many Europeans don't know that the Bible was written by African people. For information, just as an aside, during the slavery, the enslavement of our people in the United States, white enslavers removed all freedom texts, all texts about freedom and emancipation from the Bible, until they produced what was called the Slave Bible. So all the slaves knew was that Bible was the complete Bible. They were surprised to discover that the Bible was bigger than what they were given, and that it had arguments against the evils that were committed against them by white enslavers. Now you and I have seen the complete Bible. The arguments, of course, about its origins, sometimes its affectation in the course of its authorship and so on. There are other, even African scholars, who claim that this Bible we have is not the complete Bible. We'll not discuss that today. All we are looking at today is, where does the Bible come from? What are the processes that led to how it looks like today? One of the first narrative that we find in the Bible is the creation narrative. And attached to it is the birth or origin of man. These lectures are based on a theistic understanding on the origins of the universe. And so man arrives during the process of creation. In fact, even almost at the end of the creation program, Adam and Eve did not witness what had happened before. They only found themselves in a beautiful garden in which they had to find their habitat. There was no writing. Now, his ancestral, the generations that followed thereafter, ultimately were tasked with the task, with the burden to produce a text. Now, the value of a text in any history lies in the fact that it preserves knowledge that might not be known by future generations. And it assists in establishing a particular system of norms and behaviors. The text of the Bible has held its rank as a major literary production for the last 3,000 years now, because of its influence on human life, on civilizations and cultures, even on academic institutions. People go to institutions of learning, to their higher learning, just to study the Bible, its circumstances, its history, and its impact on human behavior. It is also a book that all Christians use to worship God, to do mission, to bring up their children, and so on. Across the world today, there are thousands of churches, all of them, Christian churches, all of them centered around this book. I'm not going to talk about variations in interpretations and so on. This lecture deals with how the Bible came about and how we can validate its truths for our lives. I used to have a teacher in Ladysmith, Mnamiti. His name was Mr. Ndlovu. We called him Mstibi because all his trousers were patched. He was not a knock-knee person. And he always reserved the Friday class to tell us stuff that was not in the curriculum of the institution. And one of the things he said was, as you grow older, you need to know that in history there are false histories and true histories, true narratives, and sometimes they might conflict one another. And over the years, I've come to realize that every parent, every leader in society and so on, has the duty to narrate factual realities to his children and descendants or followers in order for them to have a sound understanding of where life comes from, where it is, and why things happen the way they do. In this lecture, my intention is threefold. One, to arouse the moral conscience of concerned African senior youth and adults to the agents of a decolonial agenda, even a post-decolonial agenda, about the presence of African people in the Christian scriptures. A lot of people don't think that, I have no idea of our full presence in the Bible. In fact, in the Bible, there are more Africans than Europeans. In fact, Europeans appear towards the end of the Bible when Paul, one of the chief apostles in the New Testament, moved into Southern Europe to evangelize people among Greeks, Romans, and others. The next intention is to argue for an epistemic or a knowledge reformation in the teaching of Bible history, Christian anthropology, and the sociology of African Christians. Because we have to go into primary sources to establish what God had intended human beings to be. The last of these three intentions is to argue for an Afrocentric biblical model of mission and ministry to South African communities with specific reference to Africans. Because if we have a clear understanding of the content, the history and purpose of the Bible, it makes it easier and more valid for us to speak to our people when they already know that this book belongs to and was authored by their ancestors. South African communities, specifically Africans, get little or no respect from Westerners because of long-held myths about who they are, where they came from, and so on. Some of these myths are even deepening in the post-apartheid period in South Africa. They derive from the degeneration that we have suffered from colonization and forced superintendence of whites of our lives. The notion that as innocent children of nature, a statement from Friedrich Hegel, who was not a Christian, a German philosopher, we must be nursed and tutored by whites to serve their interests, is a silent driving motivation for continued subjection to Western civilization, so-called, and Eurocentric Christianity. There are certain historical epistemic traditions, therefore, rooted in the Christian community that are progressively fueling negative behaviors and responses to the welfare, even salvific experiences of African people. One of these is that Africans are an inferior breed of humanity. They are an inferior learner nation from which nobody can derive any worthy and sensible knowledge and value. Thus, Caucasian Westerners have made themselves teachers of African people. Now, in my thinking, we need to find a way of studying the history of the Bible with the purpose, first of all, to arrive at legitimate information about where it comes from and its purpose and its value in our lives. Two, to decolonize the narrative around Christianity. Christianity is not a European religion, it's an African, Afro-Asian religion. It belongs to this continent, which is why this continent is abuzz with Christianity. In fact, the late Kenyan theologian, John Beatty, who I suppose died in France, he came from Kenya, says in his book, The Introduction to African Religion, Africans are notoriously religious. They take religion into everything that they do. I grew up in Ladysmith. Sometimes I often saw men in shebeens drinking African beer and so on. Sometimes they would go into a spiritual mood and sing the famous Negro spiritual, Somebody's Calling My Name. The first time I heard that spiritual, it was a day when I was walking next to a shebeen. Somebody's calling my name, somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? You know, the conscience all of us have about what's wrong and right often emerges even when we're in a state of moral loss or deviation, because something in us tells us that we have a Father out there who's calling our names. Fine. There's a need for us now as Christians to restudy the Bible, its historical origins, its preparation, and so on. The tragedy of colonization that has landed on our lives is that it has come with loss, capture, destruction, and distortion for the purpose of control. Anyone who distorts your history or tells lies about it does so that you cannot derive motivation or pride from that history. So that you move into the future with a baseless foundation of who your ancestors were. In fact, in South African history, you get the impression that our people were fools and so on. And yet they were very, very wise.